Hello and welcome to the Z3 Project podcast. I'm Amitai Fraiman, the founding director of the Z3 Project, and this is our podcast. In today's conversation, we explore how summer camps are a crucible for Jewish peoplehood. You know, I'm Israeli. I didn't grow up in the U.S., and I never really had the chance to go to camp myself. And I really was struck on how much I learned from this episode. And hopefully for you as well, whether you are a seasoned camp goer, you've worked at camp, your kids go to camp, and you've never been to camp, you'll find this episode as impactful and meaningful as I did. And in this episode, I had the great opportunity and zchut to be joined by two of my friends and colleagues. The first is Dr. Shelley Kedar. She leads the Connecting the Jewish People unit at the Jewish Agency for Israel. She has decades of experience training emissaries and crafting immersive peoplehood programs. Shelley helps us unpack the core ingredients, the rituals, the team challenges, and pluralistic exchanges that foster lifelong belonging. And the second guest is another dear friend, Michael Schlank. He's the CEO of NJY Camps. It's one of North America's largest residential Jewish camp network. He's a thought leader. His work has been featured in the New York Times, the Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, and other places. And he shares really from on the ground his perspective how camp innovators are adapting to today's youth and deepening Israel diaspora ties and navigating political diversity since October 7th. Their full bios are in the description of the episode. That's just a snippet of who they are and what they bring to this conversation. And in it, we answer questions like, what makes camp so transformative? Which everyday moments, cabin rituals, or late night sing-alongs are most powerful in shaping identity? How Israeli shlichim bridge gaps and fit into the camp setting? All these and more is in our conversation. So, whether this is your first time learning about Jewish camps and their impact, you're a long-time camp goer, I really hope this episode is as informative and inspiring as I have found it. And before we begin, I just want to remind you all to visit the Z3 Project website, sign up for our email, follow us on our various social channels, and most importantly, don't forget that the nominations for the 2025 Z3 Bridge Builder Award are now open. It's a $10,000 prize. Go on the website, learn about the eligibility, either nominate someone or nominate yourself. It's a great time to highlight your work and for us to all celebrate at our conference, the people who are leading the way in building bridges within our own community, between Israel and diaspora, between communities internally and elsewhere. So again, enjoy this episode. Follow us on socials. This is a Z3 Project podcast. I'm Amitai Fraiman, the founding director. Enjoy this episode about Jewish camps and their power in shaping and building Jewish community. Hi, Michael. Hi, Shelley. Welcome to the Z3 podcast. It's
Shalom. Hi. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really excited for this conversation. Very much looking forward to it. And it's the summer, middle of the summer, I think. In our camp, at least, we're just about to start second session. It's a day camp. It's different, but we're right in the heart of this. And, I'm very excited to hear, your perspectives on camp in general, this summer in particular, mixing between Israelis and Americans on campus. On camps, there's a lot to cover. So we'll jump, we'll jump right into it. And just start off the bat with, just the first question, just to have people kind of set the space, because it's widely accepted, I'd say, or widely accepted, I should say. It's still morning here. My English is catching up with my coffee intake. But it's widely accepted that the Jewish summer camps, are one of the most important, if not the most important, component in creating an identity for young Jewish campers, also leaders and counselors. And it plays such a significant role. And if you look at the time that people spend in camp, I'm curious from your perspectives, at least, to get us started on this, is like, what are the main ingredients at camp that make it so impactful on one's identity? And we'll start. At first we'll probably start with Michael, Shelley, Michael, and then this will all warm up. It'll be great.
Alphabetically.
So, yeah, well, alphabetically.
Yeah. We should go. If you want to start with me, that's fine. But Shelley's certainly more august here. But okay, I'll start for sure. So thank you again, and thank you. It's a pleasure seeing you, Shelley, and a pleasure seeing you, Amitai. So I think the secret sauce is actually pretty simple to think about, and I think about it in three parts. The first part is it's immersive, right? We take, especially in a residential camp, you take young people and put them in an experience in which they are 24/7 living and breathing and meeting challenges with one another, with peers and with adults, Some of them who they've known for years, and some of them who they're just meeting. So there's this immersive quality of that's really unique in their experiences, because that's not something that people typically do in their life. They don't typically live and work with people for 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 weeks at a time. That's number one. Number two is we take young people out of their comfort zone and we put them into a place that's different. And you get to take on a persona in camp that you might not necessarily have at home, whether that's your Jewish life or your sports persona or your theater persona, whatever that might be. And we give you that opportunity to sort of think about yourself in a different way. And the third thing, I think, from a Jewish lens, is that it's very rare that we get this opportunity to be, for many of our young people, to be so deeply immersed in Jewish life on an ongoing daily basis, surrounded by you constantly with the values and morals and ethics as the underpinnings to everything that we do. And that's true if you're coming from, that might be a little bit different if you're coming from a day school, if you're from a modern Orthodox or Dati camp, right? That might be a little bit different. But for our more pluralistic camps, that is certainly the case, that this is the singular time in your life in which your Jewish identity is primary. And that's true of your connection to Israel also. Even if you're in a modern Orthodox world, Israel may not be the only thing that you think about. But in America, if you're in one of our camps, Israel is something that you are forced to think about every minute of the day, because you're living and working and spending time with Israelis in a way that you never would at home. So I think those are the kind of things that we think about. Why camp is so effective.
So you listed like immersion, the fact that you're in it, for such the intensity of it, the freedom that comes with it. In other words, it's because it's removed from your regular, in most cases, your regular kind of environment that lets you kind of to explore or express components that might be less in the front during the year. And the third is I guess, and this to me ties with the immersiveness of it. Maybe there's a distinction there that you want to make a little bit more, but in terms of I'd say the Jewishness of it, where that's the primary lens which you experience it. I mean, that goes hand in hand with immersiveness, I guess. But yeah,
it does. But I think it's more about the primacy issue, right? It's that you can immerse. You can all residential camps or day camps in general. Camp in general is an immersive experience.
Right.
But the idea of partnering primacy with immersion together make this as a unique experience.
Got it. It's almost like I'd say this with people don't love this word, but I'll use it because I use it also lovingly about the context I work in. But it's a shtetl of sorts, right? Like if all throughout the year you're kind of out in the world in a minority kind of setting, here in the summer you're like in the little Jewish village, and you're playing out like this kind of almost utopian experience where there's nothing that's questioning or doubting that version.
That's right. And the final thing that I'll say about this, and then I'll stop talking for a moment so Shelley can speak, is the Israel piece is universal no matter where you come from. Even if you're a modern Orthodox kid who spends their entire time in day school, I mean, Israel is important. It can't possibly be as important as it is in these experiences, because you're not living and working alongside Israelis in the same way that you are in this experience.
Right. So, Shelley, I mean, that's a perfect segue. Michael really teed it up beautifully. I mean, giving you a role, I mean, you've seen that part of the equation for quite some time. You've moved up in the Sochnut in Jaffe over the years, and right now, one of the things that you do is you really oversee. This is only one element of your work, but you oversee these delegations of Israelis that go to camp. So, maybe from your perspective, both this question and the Israel piece.
Yeah. So I think from my perspective, the camp is unique because it allows two really important features. One is the collective, to feel part of a whole, which I think all of us seek in this very isolated individual world. We really, really are trying to find our collective selves, and camp allows this, but it also allows it from the other end by providing choice. As opposed to other Jewish events, I think young people don't choose the way that they enact their Judaism. So parents choose for them if you go to Jewish kindergarten, or if you go to Jewish school, if you go to even a Jewish youth movement. And definitely Bar Bat Mitzvah is not, I think, a choice. It wasn't for my children anyways. Maybe other parents are more liberal. And I think camp is really a choice, and a choice where you choose the collective that you want to belong to, Jewishly. And I think that's extremely powerful. I think that was the purpose of camps, when they were created in the United States way back, previous century. And I think that was the reason that Israelis were prominent at camps, for like 5, 6 of the past decades. Because when you think about the collective and you think about choice, you're also thinking about what this collective looks like. And Jewish life collectively looks like rituals, and it looks like songs that everybody knows how to sing, but it also looks like Israelis coming to your camp and just being part of this big community. So from our perspective, there's a really dual purpose here. On the one hand is when you create this collective atmosphere at camp, you bring in Israelis because they're inherent to the Jewish collective, whether we like them or not. Sometimes we love Israelis and sometimes we less love them, depending on the Israelis or the day. And the other end of it is that for Israelis to understand that there's actually a Jewish collective that is beyond the borders of Israel, to come to camp is a incredible aha moments. And all of you have seen shlichim when they arrive at camp and take that moment to sort of have the whole collective experience sink down. The fact that there are camp rituals, there's a camp language. Chadar Ochel is not called the same way in different camps. There's like the way that you sit here, there's the way that you clap here. There's, even I've learned across the years, there's camp clocks, the time is different on different camps. So you really are creating a very, very intensive collective experience. And then for Israelis who come from a very collective environment, we're a majority in this country, and we feel like, we don't have a sense of minority, like you said, Michael. On the contrary, and then you come to this collective and you said, oh my God, I didn't realize my perspective was so narrow. It's like, there's more of us out there. And it's an infatuation, really, with something that, again, is counterculture today, to feel part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I think
it's really interesting. And if I could just jump on one of the points and I think there's not only the collective, it's the safety. And I mean that social, emotional safety of being able to be connected to somebody in a way where there's no outside influence that's disturbing that, and you can really be you in a way that's really unique. And Israelis and Americans can connect in this really safe space. Both physically and emotionally. I think that's part of that collective as well.
Yeah. So I want to unpack the interaction in a moment. But what the both of you said beautifully is that you really identified, I think, like there's 5 elements that play, that create this Venn diagram of the uniqueness or the secret sauce of camp. And I think that's what, when you look at what the perspective that we're trying to bring in our work at Z3 from that sense is really, there's the agency, the choice, right? The immersiveness, the primacy, the sense of collective identity, and then expressing your true self, and that interacts both with the agency of choice and agency of, buy-in, but also expression. What's interesting, I think, as an Israeli on this call, Shelley as well, but I'm saying from how I experience this is that, that reality is very, very much missing in the day-to-day in the American context, which is why camp is so powerful. And then, but for Israelis, as Shelley said, which is it's amazing, is I would actually focus on like choice in relation to the rest of that, because while in Israel maybe we have sovereignty, we have agency, we have immersiveness and all that stuff. There's no choice, right? And then you come to a place and you're like, wait, you all chose to be here. You all want this. This is and
that's the biggest aha moment, I think, for everybody, is that you choose to be Jewish and to enact your Judaism in this way is really very empowering in many ways, because I don't think I'm not a believer that in Israel there's no choice, even though I know that legally there are quite a few fundamental things that we cannot choose, but there is actually a lot of plurality of expression of Judaism and Jewish life in Israel. Yet, but that's the thing. The perception is there's something that's being dictated to me.
Yes.
And you have to go and have that moratorium that Michael was describing at camp.
Yeah.
Also, Israelis typically, if we speak about shlichim for a minute, who come to camp and not teens, they're after an extreme collective experience of serving their country, and then they come to this choice again, and they chose to do this instead of something else. They come to this, fairground, I don't know, Luna Park, a big of choice.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. I agree that in Israel there's like a choice. There is more choice of expression of Judaism, but that's exactly the thing. It's still very much bounded within the confines of Judaism.
Yeah.
You can't escape it. And I think it's interesting. I mean, Hartman, they have this thing, right? I think David Hartman said, right, in Israel we're the chosen people, and in America it's the choosing people. And I think I think that actually in Hebrew, and I've used this in another episode. I don't think it can't possibly be like I'm the first one to think about this. It really isn't, but I haven't heard it elsewhere. So for now. But I think we actually mistranslate in Hebrew the chosen element, the nivchar, right? We use it as like elite, right? But I think it's actually like nivchar as savil. It's passive. The choice is made for us, right? Like we have no choice, as opposed to someone who chooses actively. Bocher, nivchar. You don't have it. You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, there's an element of excellence, but that lack of choice, I think, and that interaction between these two is something that's quite powerful, and it plays along other lines and other themes. I think are very meaningful. But I think we started here very interestingly here to start touching upon different themes. But if we can focus for a second on the interaction, there's going to be a in any given setting of this, right? Israelis come in, no matter how many times the camp does it. Some Israelis are repeat shlichim, but there's always that moment of the beginning of the first kind of interaction. So maybe we kind of like share with us, what does that look like? What is that, is it smooth? Is there scratchiness? Is there, kind of what is that interaction to kind of see through that? What are the potential breakdowns, but also more importantly, what is the gift of that interaction?
So I'll start. I guess elu ve'elu, right? Both of those things are correct. It's both very smooth and euphoric and also scratchy. And I think that is indicative of the relationship between the diaspora and Israel in general, right? I can tell you about the fact that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this, but our shlichim were delayed. In our agency, we're blessed to have nearly 250, almost 300 Israeli campers, mamash Israelis, who come to Israel, from Israel to America for camp, and they were delayed by 8 days, and so that absence, right, sort of delayed that moment in which everyone got there. And what's interesting about that is often in a typical year, although I don't know what a typical year is, but in a somewhat typical year, right, everyone gets there at the same time. In this case, that didn't happen. All the Israelis came on the 8th day. There's probably a Devar Torah there. Maybe it'll be for next week. And the joy that we saw, the real ticker tape parade that happened for these Israelis, getting off the bus with the music blaring and the flags flying and the tears coming down people's cheeks, real emotion, was amazing. And there's a honeymoon period there. It lasts about an hour. And then you have to do lice checks, and then you have to figure out why I'm in the wrong bunk, and then all of those things happen. And in many ways, I'm really grateful for the scratchy parts, because the scratchy parts, I like that term. If I might borrow that, if you don't mind, the scratchy parts are how we get to know and live with each other. Because when you get to know and live with your family, it's not all ticker tape parades and music and waving flags, right? You get to know people, who they are and how they live, and all of those things. And so I actually embrace the scratchy parts and I encourage our staff to get to know Israelis as people, because they're not some caricature of a young person holding a gun at a checkpoint, or selling shawarma on the side of a right. They're people, and so let's get to know those people in their fullness, and vice versa. So I love the scratchy parts, because the scratchy parts are what make us real and make us real family.
Nice.
So I think there's it's really interesting, because it is a choosing experience. So from the perspective of shlichim, I think there's a lot of preparation that happens before. This sort of leads to a very, professional meetup at camp that starts before, the campers actually come. And then there's, a very professional interaction, and there's roles. I think it's different when you bring teens, like Michael just described. When we bring teens to camp, it's an extremely authentic experience. Israeli teens are, at least, the ones that we're bringing, which are, teens through the Campus Together program that are either from the Western Negev area or from the Northern Confrontation Line. This is for them, this coveted vacation that they were dreaming about that they would never have access to, because usually people on Israel's geographic and social periphery are not entitled. They don't get the opportunity to come to camp in the United States. And there's like a huge level of that thrill of, oh my God, I'm in this camp. And then I think it takes 24 hours in jet lag for them to be teens again. And it's a very, very authentic experience. So everything about them as teenagers just comes out. So it doesn't matter that they're Israelis or they've suffered trauma or that they've been displaced from their homes. They're still teenagers and they complain about the food and they don't like who they bunked with. And now this activity is boring. And why can't I wear this type of, outerwear or all these sort of things? And it's very, very authentic. The magic happens, I think, when you allow them to actually interact in a thoughtful way and then release them also to, the void of informal conversations. What we found in what we've done last year and also in the winter session is that teen Israelis don't hold back. So what you said, Michael, about the bubble, they burst the bubble. And that's a risk that camps take when they take Israeli teens. They do not tend to be shy. Most of them have no reservations about talking about what they've gone through in many a detail. They are not, if camp directors are expecting, very quiet, traumatized young people, no, they're not. And in that sense, they inspire very deep conversations that Amitai, with your endeavor in Z3, you're trying to spark, and they happen organically through the teens. And they put everything on the table. They ask very difficult questions about camp as well. So as I said, there's a collective experience, but then they will say, but why do you pray this way? And didn't you hear that this is not the way to say the Kaddish? Has no one told you this is not the way, to say Birkat Hamazon? Like, it's very, very authentic. They participate and they shift the collective in every direction. I think it's beautiful. It's actually very, very, it's very welcomed by both ends. For us professionals, this is a stressful, very scratchy moment to say, how much are we going to allow this? Do we need to control this? Should we set some ground rules? Maybe we should separate them a little bit. But it works. It works because they're just themselves. They come and they are.
So
I think leaning into letting them be themselves. And it's interesting you said about the professional piece. When our Israeli staff come, shlichim, either through Sachnut or our own programs, they come and they go through the professional training, and then they are just like any other 19 or 20, 21-year-old. Some of them are great counselors. Some of them are great ceramics folks. Some of them are terrible. And my favorite is when I hear people talking about them that way. Good, better, different, but not as the Israelis, which is, by the way, a challenge that we have, right? When you have a large group of people who are other, and even though we're all Jewish, they're other. There's a language, there's cultural. The idea of not holding back is mamash on, that's for sure, as they say. Not holding back is very different. Even interactions between professionals, I think I never served in Sahel, but it's certainly clear to me that the way that a 20-year-old is comfortable speaking to a supervisor, to an American supervisor, is very different than many of our 20-year-olds are comfortable speaking to their supervisors. And that's part of the culture, right, of Sahel, of questioning authority. That becomes sometimes a really scratchy point. Like, who are you talking to, and why are you talking to me that way? And I think that's the beauty of the mosaic of Jewish life, and so we try to embrace it as much as we can, although sometimes it is a little bit of a rock and a shoe.
Yeah. So there's something that you said there, Michael, and I Shelley alluded to it earlier also, but in terms of like this, this just adds another layer there, right? This is probably the first time that American Jews are like a majority as Jews, and for Israelis that they're like a minority as Jews. Mm-hmm. Yes, everybody's Jewish, but still that dynamic already creates something that is not, is not familiar for any side of it, which adds another kind of interesting component that people, might not feel like they're, Balei Bait, because they're like, wait, there's other, and so they're like, wait, I am the Balei, like this kind of mixed reality.
Yeah, and camps are they have very deep traditions.
Right.
In camp staff, camp directors, camp cooks, they know camp through and through. And then comes, this 20, 21-year-old or even 13 or 14-year-old and says, oh, no, that's not the way to do things.
Yeah.
And
Right.
without
Right.
much, and that, I think that stirs up things also in a humbling way for the Israelis who say, oh, goodness, there's actually a whole world out there. As I said, it like opens the perspective. And I think that also causes some confrontation. That one of the sentences that is very difficult in shlichut in general for us to hear, I can say as a veteran shlicha many times, is we don't do things this way over here. Yeah. In the Israeli ear, this sounds to me like an invitation to rebel. But that's not what you mean when you say it. You actually mean we actually don't do things this way over here.
Right. We're serious about that. This is
you're not inviting me to make change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I will tell you though, on a more serious note, if I could, last summer, going back to last summer, and we learned a lot of lessons from last summer. Last summer, many of my staff had visited Israel after October 7th. I had been there 4 times since October 7th, and I thought deep connections personally to the Nutra family. We felt like we really understood the experience. Humbly, we were unbelievably wrong. Because when the Israelis, and we learned we're very different now, I think, when the Israeli staff and campers came to camp last summer, the Chatufim experience, the hostage experience was ever present, ongoing, and always in their lives. And we made some really bad mistakes with things that we did out of good intention, in goodwill, trying to do a program and then not and stepping in it or putting up a Chatufim, a hostage display and then taking it down. You don't do that in Israel. You don't take them down, right? And we did by culture. Well, we don't do that here. Once Yom Yisrael is over, we take the Yom Yisrael stuff down. Well, you don't take that down without telling us first.
Yeah.
And so we learned a lot I learned personally about how much I didn't know. And it didn't strike me until I was back in Israel again with my family this year. And I looked around and I said, oh, I understand now. These people, these Israelis on every corner, in front of my personal house, has been a poster of Omer Nutra for 20, how many months now, right? But for the rest of the world, even for us, it was a thing, but it wasn't the only thing. As important as it was, the bracelet I wear and the dog tags that everybody wear. And we learned very much that this has become part of the DNA of Israelis. And I hate to generalize about Israelis in general, but I've had enough time to spend time with enough folks. And so we as Americans learned an important lesson, American Jews who deeply love and care about the land, that we are not Israeli. And we were told that quite rightly, very clearly in the experiences that we had. And I thought that was a great experience for our adult staff and for our campers and everyone involved to understand that lesson was painful and hard, but important.
Yeah. So, that raises a question. Certainly we're in a moment. It's like Michael said before, what's normal? I don't know, since 2019, nothing has been normal, I'd say. But the reality has shifted very dramatically over the past couple of years in terms of the relationship between, what's going on in Israel, of course, has an impact. There's this ongoing trend of worry around the relationship between American Jewry and Israel. You can put we can explore that conversation on a bigger kind of scale as well. But I think in the camp setting, I'm curious to hear, how this, you started teasing this a little bit, Michael and Shelley. I'm sure that in the prep side of things are different as well. How has October 7th impacted it, on a deeper level? There's the things on the surface, of course, of behaviors and whatnot, the trauma, but I'm sure there's more than that. And the reason I'm asking is because there's something that I'm always trying to be mindful of, is that, in this relationship, right? It's very, very easy, and this comes from like the work that I do on a regular basis, but certainly both of you as well, is how do you, to the extent it's possible, and it's not always going to be this way, but how do you keep this relationship egalitarian? Because when you bring in people from a very, very extreme component, that can really tip the scales. But the purpose isn't to be a rehab for the Israeli teens or the shlichim. It's not, but they're also not there as props for the American kids. So how do you kind of think about that, and in particular in light of this moment?
I, at least from my perspective, I think the question is, are we able at camp to identify the shared values that we hold, and be egalitarian around them, as opposed to, the context that October 7th has caused both in Israel and in North America, because the issue of Israel hatred and anti-Semitism, and violence that is erupting in America is very, very concerning also to the staff and the teams that we're meeting from the American side. So I think there's a huge question about, what are the shared values that we hold together, and can we rally and be egalitarian around them? And Israel as a Jewish value is something that sort of, I feel we still have work to rally around. Even the love of Zion or Zionism as as a value, and not just a political stance pro or against something, is something that is questioned. Can we rally around it? And that's where the egalitarianism sort of escapes. From my perspective, what identifies Israeli society after October 7th, especially the ones that we see and we send over to United States camps, is that they wear their pain, on their sleeve, as you say. And they literally do. They have a sticker and they have a pin and they have this, what you said, Michael, really hit home, because I'm thinking about all the stickers everywhere and nobody's going to remove them for years to come. And that's something that's very, very prominent. That's something that we live with as a reality. So the pain is worn on the sleeve, which makes, everything very exposed. But there's also pain on the other side, on the American side, people who are choosing to come to Jewish camp to be part of the collective, who are making a statement to their friends at home. This is what I'm doing this summer, or this is where I'm working this summer, for the professional staff. So I think our work as professionals, as educators, is really to find and articulate, and also be very explicit about the values that we share together, even if we have different viewpoints on these values, and holding them together to form this community and collective that camp is supposed to generate. It's very, very easy to avoid, difficult questions at camp. You have a perfect setup. There's young people, sun usually. Food is okay. There are physical activities, right?
Fewer
So
adults,
we can, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we can somewhat maybe avoid, Jewish values, but that's not what camp is for. And I think most camps do a fantastic job in actually putting these issues front and center. Obviously age appropriately. But really saying, this is what we need to be rallying around now as a community. This is how we take care of each other, because of everybody's pain. And also because of, we don't want to be bound by just grief and trauma and disaster.
Right.
Where,
Right.
that's not what our people is about. This is not what peoplehood is about.
Yeah, I said to our staff, and I wrote, that Israel is not October 7th. It is part of October 7th, but it is not the only defining moment. It's a defining moment, but it's not the definition of the country. I will say, Shelley, that one of the things that I see from our side is that it has crystallized for many people the importance of Israel and Zion in their lives. And so I actually can say, and again, it's, you have the lens from which you view the world, and I view it through the world of the people that I come in contact with. Thousands of them, but certainly not a complete picture. It has crystallized. It has forced us. Last year, we were in many ways compelled to define who we are when it comes to that. In writing, we wrote, myself and my executive director wrote a piece about what it means to be a Zionist camp. We stood in front of, the thousands of staff and said, this is who we are. These are our values. We can argue about the government and all, but there's some things that are not that are not up for debate, and I think that's okay. And if that doesn't fit for you, this might not be the right collective for you, because not every collective is correct for everybody. And I think for many of our staff, it created this real desire and call to action to redefine themselves publicly, to take a stand. Because if you were quiet in North America and America, acquiescence was put you in a place in which you were now complicit. And so you really had to choose, which side of the encampments are you on? Are you inside the tent or you're outside the tent, both figuratively and literally?
Yeah.
And what I saw from many of our staff, who I've known for a number of years now, who I didn't know where they stood, right? Israel was a thing, Israel Day and shlichim, and it was fun and nice, but they were forced to pick a side. And thank God most of them picked the side that we all agree with, right? And that didn't mean they picked the side of the government. They meant they picked the side of Israel as a people, as our family. And so I think that was really heartening for me as a professional, as a leader of an organization. And I also saw many of our families reaching out to us who hadn't been in contact with us in many, many years to say, my only real experience was the trip I went on to in Israel when I was 18 years old, and now I'm 27 or I'm 47. Or my only experience was meeting an Israeli, and I need to connect to those people again. And you're the way we're going to do it. How do we do that? And we did a whole bunch of things around that. And so I thought, for me, Dan Senor said something in a podcast a couple of months ago, which I happen to agree with, and that is, I'm less worried about Israel. I am more worried about the American diaspora. I am not worried about the American diaspora's connection to Israel. I think that has been there's a lot of noise around that. I think the large majority of Jews are Zionist, right? That's what's the Pew poll, 89 or 90% of those folks are Zionists. I'm concerned about those other 10%. So that's not concerning to me. I'm concerned about other things about Jewish life. But what I've seen here in our little corner of the world is that this experience has crystallized for many people the import of Israel. And Hamas did a lot of things, a lot of awful, terrible, tragic, horrific things. But one of the things it did do in October was force people to pick a side. And I think that that was something that hasn't happened our generations. As I look at this on these screens, we didn't have to pick sides. We had the luxury, or many ways, or certainly in America, of being wishy-washy about what side that you were on. And that October 7th forced us to do that. And thank God, most of our folks that we deal with chose a side that I like to say the good guys, right, are on the right side. Doesn't mean that you're on the side of the government or on the side of the way a war was being conducted, or not, whatever that might be, but you're on the side of Israel as the eternal country of the Jewish people, and of Zionism as being inextricably linked to Jewish peoplehood.
So I appreciate that, and something that Shelley said, and I want to take a step further into this. There's not to presume a shared or egalitarian sentiment around context and realities, but much more around values. And even then, there's going to be scratches. And what Michael's describing really is that there is a post October 7th, at least, there's been like some kind of clarifying moment in which the set of values and core beliefs have been identified in a much much clearer way, I guess. And so my question then is, within that, two sides of that. Number one is, I can't imagine. I mean, first of all, in our neck of the woods, I know that what Michael is describing, what Shelley's describing, isn't always the case. There are some camps that have a little bit more of a different stance, different position. And so I know that on the camping landscape, and there's a difference. But I imagine also internally there's some differences. So, like, on the one hand, how do we allow for that to flourish, not for the sake of like watering down or the superficial sense of conversation, but for like real, meaningful and purposeful and intentional differences, so that we don't fall into this like groupthink, uniformity kind of thing. And the reason I'm asking this is because, fundamentally, I think that with all the grounding context that you guys listed in the beginning, right, the immersiveness, the agency, all that stuff, there can be an attempt to push it also to unified thinking. But I think that Dafka, the differences is what makes, within that immersiveness, there's still room for the difference, actually makes it more powerful. So I'm curious again from, on the camp side, on the shlichim side, how do you create that space of difference, and also how do you avoid, so both sides of, I guess, of the dangers of that, right? The too many opposing views.
I want to suggest that the issue is not, a lack of difference, but really a fear of conducting a conversation that could be slightly controversial or creating discomfort, or that forces one to make a statement or think about where they stand, which is something that we've been avoiding quite religiously for a long time. From a grave fear of uniformity, but we took it really, I think, to a very extreme, in the sense that you can't make a stand about anything. If you make a stand, then you're only identified with one side of, the political map that know how to stand up, which is ridiculous. So I think that Michael, you spoke about, the safe spaces, etc. And I think that notion has crippled a lot of very important conversations that young people should be having, definitely at camp, where they can explore and not be, punished or suffer any social cost to their opinions because they're among their friends. And when there is no social media, which is so important, we haven't mentioned social media here at all, but camp is social media less, which means that you can actually voice an opinion without having 50, 100, 1,000 people shouting back at you that you don't know who they are in the void of the internet. That's incredible. So I think it's actually, it's our obligation to have uncomfortable and serious conversations because camp allows it. And also it's the type of environment where you have the conversation and you don't just leave the room and go home. You leave the room and then you go to the Chadar Ochel, you go to the dining room, you have whatever it is that you feed the kids over there. I'm not sure. And then you have your rest
time. It's a lot
time.
of food comments, Shelley.
No, I know. It's, for some reason, that was the traumatic piece for me at camp. And then
it's fair.
It's fair. And then you have rest, and there's a lot of time to process a difficult conversation. There's a lot of time to process an argument. It's like a marriage, in the good sense of it, is that people don't just slam the door and say, "That's it, I'm not talking to you anymore." You're still living together. And I think educationally, Amitai, I'm actually not afraid of creating difference. I'm afraid of allowing indifference just for the sake of, the fear of, oh my God, we will create uniformity. Mamash lo. And when a camp says, these are the values that I stand by, they are defining the poles that hold the tent. They're not defining the tent. They're saying, these are our poles. It's a very big tent in a camp. You can stand here, you can stand there, you can stand anywhere. But just know that these are the poles that hold us. That's also, I don't think that's enforcing something or coercing people into opinion. It's now find where you stand in relation to, to these poles. There's too much fear around having deep conversations. And if we've learned anything about today's young people, they're better than that. They're capable. They think. And they want to express themselves actually verbally and not through their, fingers and typing with words. And we should allow them that skill.
I think you're right, Shelley. And I think, my sister said something to me. I remember when my father passed away, having some difficult times. And she said, people don't, in crisis, people don't they're not different. They're just more of themselves, right? And I think very much that's what's going on here. We're more of ourselves. And I think Shelley's right. I think by defining who you are, you're in essence inviting a conversation, because if I'm something, then I'm not something else, right? If I'm nothing, then there's no real conversation to have. And so the way we think about these things is developmentally appropriate, right? Different from a second grader to a 15-year-old. But we are very open and encourage conversation. By the way, we have Israelis, so you can't stop that, right? So they're going to have.
They don't even speak good English. That's the shocking fact of it.
Right. And so we welcome those conversations, and we want people to have difficult, comfortably uncomfortable, as I like to say, right? Being comfortably uncomfortable about those conversations. We are a people of the book and a people who argue across generations, right? And so we want to do that. And I think in many ways we knew by making a stand that we were opening ourselves for those conversations. Because, by the way, there were some alumni who said, not for us anymore. Because I didn't know you believed in that, right? And so now, okay, we can have that conversation, but this is kind of where we believe as a community. That doesn't mean that you don't. If you want to be still connected to community, that's okay. But here's where we stand, and we do encourage through work with Sachnut and iCenter and work that we're doing with Z3 to have difficult conversations. But those difficult conversations have to happen with the grounding of fact, with the grounding of values, with the grounding of ethics. Otherwise, they're meaningless. They're just TikTok conversations. We want to avoid the TikTok conversations. Here are the things that we know are facts. Here are the things we know that we believe and that why we believe them, that are informed by facts. Now go at it. Have those conversations with each other informally, formally. If you need some help, let us know. Listen, we had a staff member raise their hand, I was told in one of our orientations, and after they heard what was going on and said, this place is not for me. And you know what? That's great, because in many ways, we actually did our job, which is we defined something and someone couldn't stomach being in a Zionist space. Great. Then that's probably not the right place for you. Better that you should know that at the outset than you should find that out 2 weeks in. But for most people, this is a place in which they can be comfortably uncomfortable and have those conversations in a socially and psychologically safe place, right? Emotionally and psychologically safe place.
Yeah. So is this something that you feel has been, I mean, generally speaking, I imagine that, I don't know, I'll just ask, has this like focus on this comfortably uncomfortable accelerated since 10/7?
So I'm a little bit removed from the day to day, right? And so I want to be honest about that. And then maybe if you had one of my camp directors or someone else, but I think I have my finger on the pulse enough. You know, honestly, what most people want to do when they come to camp, they want to be in community with each other. They want to have fun. They want to learn. They want to develop lifelong friendships. And so most teenagers don't seek out to have these ongoing difficult conversations on a daily basis because they really just want to hang out with each other for a lot, and young people also on staff. So I think that's the overarching thing. I don't want to overplay this, that we spend all day in Chavruta talking about, whether or not whether or not that the government should fall or not fall, or what does it really mean that Netanyahu is in Washington. That doesn't happen a lot. It happens sometimes,
Right.
but I think it happens in ways that are comfortable because we do all the other things, which is to make them socially connected and have an environment that in those conversations organically happen amongst and between each other in safe spaces. And I don't mean safe spaces in the horrible way that they've developed in American terms, but in a place where you can disagree with somebody and not feel like you're going to be socially ostracized. So I think it happens. And I think sometimes it happens meaningfully. I want to say one last thing, and then we had this beautiful conversation. We had one of our staff members, his name is Eitan Greenberg. He spoke in front of the entire staff at Staff Week about his friend Uri Gerby, who had been killed in Gaza. And he spoke in front of 500 people. This is a 21-year-old speaking in front of largely other 21-year-olds, powerfully about what it meant for his friend to lose his friend. It wasn't about it happened in Gaza, but it wasn't about the politics. It was just about introducing all of us to Uri. And I wear Uri's band this summer. And I thought that was such a meaningful experience for everyone to know that Eitan was someone who they could understand. What does it really mean when 21-year-olds go to war? And then they went to play tennis, right, on Sunday. And so I think those experiences are the secret sauce, if I want to go back to what you said, right? So it's not about having chavruta or having chinuch always talking about it. It's about allowing people to feel like this is a space in which we can have those difficult conversations whenever they happen organically.
Yeah, I think there's an educational opportunity in seizing the moment of the depth that we discover in young people and their, a little bit of their quest to not be Chat GPT or AI, reverberating machines when they come to camp and they disconnect from their mobile phones. And it's an opportunity that, great scholars like Jonathan Haidt speaks about, in great lengths, and we're giving them that opportunity. I sort of feel it is our obligation to enable them to engage in dialogue. I like respectfully, Michael, even the term difficult conversations, I don't know. Having a conversation is difficult. This is difficult now. I have to listen to you, have to understand what you're saying. I have to not speak when you're speaking. Like, there's a lot of skill in it. Yeah. And camp is an incredible opportunity psychologically and developmentally to disconnect young people from their phones, because they chose to do it. It's not even, it's not a punishment. They chose to come to camp. They chose to be part of a collective. They chose to, to be part of this experience. And I feel educationally we need to seize that moment. And by the way, the conversations don't only have to be about Jewish life in Israel. There's a lot of things that teens want to talk about and that they can only talk about at camp. And I feel that needs to feed into, the training that we give, and also even more so to the vision and the impact that we expect of camps, because camps are really very impactful experiences. You will not find a lot of, people in leadership positions in the United States, in any Jewish institution, who cannot tell you about their formative experience at camp. And they won't tell you about their bar mitzvah, but they will tell you which camp they went to. So it's really a very, very meaningful experience, and it's an opportunity that has to be seized educationally. Otherwise, we're just giving it away. Chaval. And I don't think we're doing it, by the way. I don't think that we're giving it away, but I think we can do better.
So I have one. I have I want to close up on this part of it, and then I want to see what else we can unpack in this conversation. So I think Michael, you alluded to this. Shelley, you alluded to this as well. This neurosis of like a decline in relationship or caring or centering. This is like, I'd say, outside the camp world. In general, this is a conversation we have where professionals in many settings where it's like this and what we're doing. So first of all, from your perspective, is that is that correct? If it's correct, then what do we do? And if it's incorrect, then where's the gap? Like, why is it? Where's the hype coming from?
There's an Israeli song that not every year can be, lo kol yom yom huledet, not every day can be summer camp. I think that the notion of caring is not something that we should be bothered with, especially after October 7th. We've seen a lot of caring that is ongoing as well on the emotional level. I think the notion of closeness, how, close I feel to the Jewish people, to Jewish peoplehood, to community, to Jewish life, to Israel, is also something that has been somewhat intensifying after October 7th. So, but camp is not real world. It's not supposed to be the real world. It's a disconnect. It's an immersive experience that allows you to just, be in that moment. And it ends. The last day of camp is a devastating day, right? You go home, you cry. Yeah, it's a sad day. So, camps have a wonderful opportunity to impact young people at a very important stage of their lives for a very important period of time. It's not a short, 5-day experience. It's a weeks-long, experience, and there's a lot in it. And I feel that investment in camp and in the content in camps could really impact the entire Jewish community and its ability to engage in conversation about anything that matters. Not necessarily everything that's difficult, but everything that matters.
Yeah, Shelley, I think you're right about the limited time, but I do think camps have something to teach the rest of the world about how to engage with each other, right? About how to engage with each other authentically and meaningfully. I think you're right.
Space, Michael, one of the things that camp does is to share space. You have to bunk with people. Right. You have to interact with them. It's a wonderful social experience.
And you take away the phones, and that's true. And you've mentioned that a number of times. I think that is it's almost, for someone who does the work I do, it's almost it's a given, right? We know that's the case, and so we don't think about it as much as folks on the outside. It is a thing to watch 1,000 young people walking around without their phones, right? No connection to that. But I also think what we think that camp does is, talk about closeness and feelings, but I think that what camp does is it creates an authentic experience in an inauthentic way, right? There's an inauthentic setting about it, but you create an authentic connection, because what we know is when our young people go to Israel on birthright, one of the things they do is they seek out their counselors, right? Or when they go to Israel 10 years after their first, they seek out their counselors. So those are authentic experiences, and I think the investment, and a little bit of a pitch here, right? The investment in camp and the investment in what happens after camp, right? Yep. Because I think we have this opportunity, this inflection point where these kids are primed. It's almost like we think about when the kids come back from gap years in Israel. They're, in America, they're on fire. They say, right? And sometimes we waste that fire. I think we have an opportunity to think about as a community is what do we do with this amazing connection? These thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people have made these connections. How do we leverage that in September, October, November, December? And not just hope that they'll come back, because sometimes they don't. And those relationships need to be leveraged. And what are the lessons that we learn? I'd like to see more work done intentionally about how to do that. Jack Wertheimer wrote a beautiful book, right? In the last chapter, I remember, was about how important camp was. I'd like to see us with more dedicated work to think about how do we take the lessons that happen inside of a camp setting and make them applicable to a more authentic lifelong Jewish connection between Israel and America, and also what about what happens in Israel and in America or North America in general.
Yeah.
So you both teed us up. We're coming up on time. This is perfect, the perfect place. For the last. This is the question, the last question. Michael, start talking about this, but I'm gonna, Shelley, you were already leading us in this direction, so we'll let you start. But like, if you have to, think about it, redesign or improve or add, the camp experience is clearly, and scientifically proven to be highly impactful. But both of you kept on saying, and there's more, and there's more. So what is something that you would do that to add to the experience, improve it, sharpen it a little bit, from your perspective?
Wow. So firstly, I'm humbled to speak about anything in the camp world because it is an incredible phenomena. This is an industry that's been going on for decades, and it's highly successful. On the one end, I think camp needs to be made, and I do join you in your pitch, Michael. It needs to be made accessible to as many of young people who might choose, this experience as possible. Because today, when we're looking around the opportunities that people have to experience Jewish life and to actually explore their Jewish identity and their connection to Israel, the offering of camp is one of the most meaningful opportunities out there that is actually applicable to all sorts of Jews of all kinds and all colors and all denominations and all affiliations and questions. Jews of all questions can come to camp. And I think that's something that needs to be an emphasis. The second is this element of mifgash, of Israelis at camp. We have a beautiful tradition of bringing Israelis to work at camps and be, adults that work at camp. We are developing and heightening the number of, increasing incredibly the number of Israelis that actually come to participate at camp. And that changes the dynamics. And just from speaking, now that we speak about volumes, about almost 1,000 a year, there needs to be best practices to be drawn from there. We need to work better at integration, at, allowing these conversations that we were speaking about to actually happen, to work with our staff to actually be able to facilitate a lot of these things and to see Israelis, just as you said also, Amitai, not as a relic or a program that has come to entertain us at camp, but as participants, because our collective is made up of many types of Jews, and a very large Jewish community lives in Israel. And thirdly, I would also speak about the global element. There are very few camps who are able to technically, not maybe necessarily educationally, to incorporate Jews from other countries in their camps. Camp is a beautiful environment to generate peoplehood. And we know that language is not a barrier. Nobody speaks English well, ever, and it still works. And I think we need to think about that as as leaders of the Jewish community. How do we create a peoplehood experience at camp that incorporates and allows the opportunity for everybody to feel they're part of a collective that is called camp, I don't know, NJY, whatever camp name that I can plug in and offend here on this podcast. Chas v'chalila, all camps are great. So Camp Shelley, the peoplehood camp that invites and makes sure that there's a good representation and an opportunity for conversation, to go swimming with, to not, to defy curfew with, to do things that you're not supposed to be doing at the dining room with, and, and also to have a conversation with the Jewish people. I think that's the direction to be looking forward.
Amazing, Shelley. I mean, I think we're pretty lucky and blessed in our programs. We have Jews from Argentina and London and Mexico and France. And as I'm walking around, the thing that I get the most pride about is when I see in front of the office 5 young people, all from different countries, all from different walks of life, but all sharing their Jewish peoplehood and all having one thing in common. They're standing in front of an office waiting for their mail or their Oreos, whatever that might be.
They're Oreos,
And the
probably.
fact that whatever that might be, and it's beautiful. And so we do a little bit of it, or maybe a lot of it, but we could do more. I have one thought. It's been a big idea I've had for a little bit, and I think that we can extend this idea of immersive experiences to families. We do a little bit. We do a fair amount of family camps with an organization. With the right funding, I would love to see that same experience that those teenagers have for whole families to get to spend that time together. Maybe not a month, because we want everyone to still talk to each other at the end. But it would be amazing to
Maybe
have.
people can switch families when they join your camp.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, that's a whole nother podcast, Shelley.
Yeah. Sorry.
To have a real family camp in which Israelis and Americans spend time either in America or in Israel together with each other, because I think, I'll end with, it's a little bit of a sad story, but I think it actually speaks to it helped me understand a little bit. I was talking to one of the Rosh Hashanah. She's a woman I've known for a long time, and she said to me, talking about her experience during the 12-day war, which is, I guess we call it now, the 12-day war. And she's talking about holding her child with a bottle of water and a phone, her 3-year-old, and making sure that she can touch the other 2 children so that if, God forbid, the missile hits, that she'll be able to get them out of the rubble, right? And I thought to myself, that's both terrible, but also really as a parent, I don't need to hear any more about her life. I really get all of the things that she was going through for those 12 days, or at least enough. And then we talked about what it's like to, have ice cream. And I think if more adults got to experience familiarity, say that twice, it'd be really meaningful. And so I think that we can replicate that immersive experience over a week or 10 days in either one or both of our countries. And if we developed these ongoing relationships with family units, I know we have sister cities and those are great, but the idea of having these family units from places, to me, would be really meaningful. And Amitai, you like to dream big, and I sort of took you up on thinking about that. And we have these wonderful partnerships. Sachnut is this amazing partner that we've had for so many years, and I'd love for us to start to think about how to do things, in ways that we haven't in the past, because now is the time to do that.
Yeah. So thinking big, I think, is a hallmark of the Jewish spirit and the Zionist kind of ethos of dreaming big and making things happen. So, on that note, I want to thank you both very, very much for joining us. I know you both this is like the peak season for both of you in different ways. And for me, it's a little bit easier. Kids are at camps or whatever. But
You're welcome.
thank you, Bemet. Thank you for this meaningful conversation. Really, this exploration of the magic of camp and what happens in it. So, I really appreciate it, your insight and your time. So thank you.